Today, in a rather sad way, I want to address myself to the members of the National Assembly and Senate, to members of Parliament. First, to remind them that they have the privilege to serve this country, that what they do today will affect this country in generations to come. I want to remind members of Parliament that they're among the few who will be recorded in history as the people who are given a chance to serve mankind in this part of the world. So everything they do, they must always remember that they are not just ordinary citizens. Let me also remind members of Parliament that the role of a leader in the development of any country, indeed in the development of any institution or agency, in the progress of any company or organization, cannot be gainsaid. It is the leader who sets pace, is a leader whose vision then takes the organization, the company, or the country, or institution where it ought to be in time. And therefore, when members of Parliament become so cheap, so stomach-oriented, when members of Parliament spend every available minute of their day scheming on how to make more money from poor Kenyans, then you wonder where this country is headed. I want every member of Parliament to sit down one day for 5 minutes and reflect on where their action is taking this country. I also want to remind members of Parliament that when Kenyans were making the Constitution, when the views of Kenyans were sought, two things stood out. One, Kenyans talked about an overwhelming executive, what came to be known as imperial presidency. Kenyans had wanted this to be dealt with, and that's why we have devolution. That is why we have the kind of system we have, the presidential system. That's why the president is put in check much more than the previous presidents. But there's something else Kenyans consistently talked about, consistently and persistently. Kenyans were interested. Kenyans talked about this, and they talked about the greed of MPs. So, members of Parliament, those of you who were there then, in the years that Kenyans were formulating the Constitution, you will remember Kenyans were not happy with the greed of members of Parliament. And that's why SRC was put in place. Indeed, SRC was not put in place for any other thing. Today, I will remind members of Parliament, SRC was put in place because of you, because of the perceived greed. And I want to warn members of Parliament, if you continue in the manner you are continuing, it will be much, much easier to sell in a referendum the idea of a reduced cabinet, Parliament. Because in the Punguza Mzigo initiative, one of the things that people are focusing on is a parliament of less than 200 people. That's both Senate and the National Assembly. I also want to remind senators, Kenyans know you are not the upper hand by law, but they expect you to be more reasonable than the National Assembly. And that is why I'm reminding senators, in the next referendum, which I'm sure will be there, Kenyans will have no problem in making Senate an upper house. But for that to happen, you senators must help your younger brothers in the National Assembly to know that Kenyans are unhappy. It is not good at all. As an educated person, as a person who understands what's going on in the world, I know people need to be paid well. I know members of the National Assembly ought to be paid much better than they are being paid. But I'm looking at the country in which they operate. I'm looking at the economy, an economy where more than 50% of the population live below the poverty line. People who go to bed hungry in their millions. In a country where people are having to sell the little parcels of land they have to take loved ones to hospital because of the collapsed healthcare in the country. People where taking kids to school is a problem. In a country full of filth, in a country with an employment rate, in a country where over 12 million young men and women are unemployed from a population of about 45 million. In a country like this, if you are a member of parliament, sure, don't ask for any more money. I think we must now tell members of parliament that if you think this money is too little, just get the hell out of parliament. You look, and I'm telling some of them are my friends, you look ridiculous. You look ridiculous as you ask for. In fact, some of you look ugly. You become so ugly as you begin to ask for more money. Because it doesn't make sense. How can Wanjiko understand you wanting a house allowance of 250,000 in a country where a professor is not even paid that kind of money? What are we talking about? We must be careful as leaders because our actions today will inform what happens to this country. And this economy can collapse when the leaders are busy thinking about nothing but food into their stomach. This brings me to something that I've always wondered. Just how much money does a Kenyan need? Look at the kind of greed in the country. Look at the kind of corruption we have in the country. Corruption that will bring this country to its knees. We borrow so much to feed corruption. We borrow money for people to come and steal. The kind of money that poor Kenyans will pay for tens of years to come. I think we must be careful with this. Because honestly, and I'm also asking leaders today, and the thieves of this country, close your eyes one day and count 1, 2, 3, up to 10, the billionaires and the powerful men who have died in this country in the last 10 or so years. Ask yourself whether anybody remembers them. People have forgotten them. When you make these billions, don't you see children and wives and concubines fighting over these billions of yours when you are dead? So what's the point? What's the point of making so much money that you don't even need? Money people will fight for, money that will enrich lawyers as family members fight. Why don't you just have enough money? One of the problems in Africa is primitive accumulation. It is this primitive accumulation. None of you is even creating a financial empire that can outlive him. That will be a family name. None of you is a Ford. So that once you are dead with your billions, there is a Ford Foundation. You are just doing primitive accumulation, loading money and putting under mattresses in sacks. So members of parliament, look at what is happening. Look at maize today. Because of the greed of Kenyans, and parliament is sleeping, chasing money instead of knowing, for example, when you import millions of bags of maize today, you are killing the farmer. Farmers still have maize. The government has been unable to buy that maize. Millers have been unable to buy the maize which farmers have in their stores and homes. And today, out of greed, you want to import a duty-free maize? In some parts of this country, people are about to harvest, others are harvesting. In 2 months' time, the major grain growers are going to be harvesting maize in this country, and you begin maize import now to kill the farmer, and you want the same farmer to vote for you next time. Shame on you, leaders of this country. And therefore, you members of parliament, it is in your interest. It is in your interest to take care, because Kenyans will come for you. I'm inviting members of parliament today to go and Google and see the rough interaction some countries have had with parliament. What have people done to parliaments globally when they are annoyed? You are pushing Kenyans to a point they may come to that parliament and evict you. It has happened in other places. It will happen here unless you members of parliament take care. You have to love your country. You have to be sensible. Whatever you do, think of what other people are thinking. In fact, if you have children, they are ashamed of you.